In 1922, when archaeologists opened the tomb of Tutankhamun, they found gold, sacred oils, preserved organs, and provisions for the afterlife. Among the items placed beside the young pharaoh's body, sealed in darkness for 3,300 years, was a small vessel containing black seeds. The Egyptians had buried many things with their kings. They did not bury anything without reason. This seed, whatever it was, mattered enough to accompany a god-king into eternity. Today, those same seeds grow wild in Mediterranean fields, sold in Middle Eastern markets, studied in laboratories around the world. In the West, most people have never encountered them. The seed did not disappear. The attention did. The tomb of Tutankhamun was not the richest burial site in Egypt's Valley of the Kings, but it was the most intact. When Howard Carter broke through the sealed doorway in November of 1922, he found a burial chamber that had remained essentially undisturbed since the 14th century before the Common Era. The objects recovered numbered in the thousands: gold masks, ceremonial chariots, canopic jars containing the pharaoh's organs, furniture, clothing, weapons, jewelry, everything a king might need in the afterlife. And among these objects, almost overlooked in the abundance of treasure, were botanical specimens, seeds, dried plants, oils pressed from fruits and flowers. The Egyptians understood that the journey to the afterlife required sustenance, and they provided it. One of the seeds recovered from the tomb was small, black, and angular, shaped like a tiny wedge, no larger than a sesame seed. It had been preserved for over 3 millennia in the dry darkness of the burial chamber. When examined, it was identified as a seed that still grew across the Mediterranean and the ancient Near East, a seed that had been cultivated and traded and consumed for purposes that extended far beyond simple nutrition. This was not a food in the ordinary sense. It was not wheat or barley, the staples of Egyptian agriculture. It was something else, something valued highly enough to accompany a pharaoh into death. The question is not whether this seed was important to the ancient world. The archaeological record answers that. The question is why, 3,000 years later, most of the industrialized world has forgotten it exists. The earliest written records of this seed appear in the ancient Near East, in the texts and traditions of peoples who lived at the crossroads of Africa, Asia, and Europe. The Egyptians used it. The seeds were pressed for oil, ground into preparations, and incorporated into rituals whose purposes are not always clear to modern scholars. What is clear is that the seed was cultivated deliberately, traded commercially, and valued beyond its caloric contribution. The Old Testament contains what many scholars believe is a reference to this seed. In the book of Isaiah, a passage describes the practices of farmers, how they scatter one type of seed, plant another in rows, and thresh each according to its nature. The Hebrew word used in this passage has been translated in various ways across centuries of scholarship, but several traditions identify it with this small black seed. If accurate, this places its cultivation in the Levant at least 7 centuries before the Common Era. The Greeks knew it. Hippocrates, the physician whose name still attaches to the oath taken by doctors, reportedly described its uses. Dioscorides, writing in the 1st century of the Common Era, catalogued it in his systematic survey of medicinal plants, a text that would remain authoritative for more than 1,000 years. The seed was used, he noted, for respiratory complaints, for digestive disturbances, for conditions that modern categories might describe as inflammatory. The Romans knew it as well. Pliny the Elder mentioned it in his encyclopedic writings on the natural world. It was grown in gardens, sold in markets, and used in ways that blurred the distinction between food, medicine, and ritual. But it was in the Islamic world that this seed achieved its greatest prominence. During the medieval period, as the Islamic Golden Age produced advances in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy, scholars compiled and expanded upon the medical knowledge of earlier civilizations. Greek texts were translated, Egyptian practices were documented, and the accumulated wisdom of centuries was organized into systematic treatises. This seed appeared throughout that literature. It was described as a remedy of unusual versatility. A hadith, a saying attributed to the Prophet Muhammad, declared that the seed was a cure for every disease except death. Whether understood literally or metaphorically, The statement elevated the seed to a status few plants have achieved in any tradition. Persian physicians wrote about it. Arab pharmacologists cataloged its preparations. The great medical encyclopedias of the medieval Islamic world, texts that would later be translated into Latin and influence European medicine for centuries, included detailed discussions of the seed's properties and applications. It spread wherever Islamic culture reached, across North Africa, into Spain, through Central Asia to the Indian subcontinent. In each region, it acquired local names, local uses, local traditions of preparation, but the underlying recognition remained constant. This was a seed of unusual significance. In India, it became part of Ayurvedic and Unani medical systems. It was used for digestion, for skin conditions, for supporting the body's general vitality. It was ground with honey mixed with oils, incorporated into complex formulations that were passed from practitioner to student across generations. For at least 3,000 years across dozens of cultures, spanning 3 continents, this seed was cultivated, studied, traded, and used. It was not obscure. It was not marginal. It was central to medical traditions that served billions of people. And then, in the West, it was almost entirely forgotten. The decline of traditional plant knowledge in Europe began before industrialization, but industrialization accelerated it. As European medicine evolved from the medieval reliance on herbals and botanical preparations toward the laboratory-based pharmacology of the 19th and 20th centuries, the status of plant medicines changed. What had been the foundation of therapeutic practice became, increasingly, the domain of folk healers, grandmothers, and colonial subjects. Science, it was believed, had moved beyond such things. This was not entirely without justification. The isolation of active compounds, morphine from opium, quinine from cinchona bark, aspirin from willow, demonstrated that plants contained specific molecules responsible for their effects. These molecules could be extracted, purified, standardized, and manufactured. They could be patented. A whole plant, growing in a garden, could not be patented. A traditional preparation, known for centuries, could not be owned. The knowledge embedded in peasant agriculture and folk medicine had no economic value within the emerging pharmaceutical system. This seed suffered from that logic. It could not be mechanically harvested at scale. The plants that produced it were small, annual, and grew best in conditions that did not align with the monocultures developing in industrial agriculture. The seeds were tiny, thousands per ounce, and required careful processing. There was no infrastructure to handle them, no market demanding them, no profit margin to justify investment. Colonial administrators, where they encountered the seed in North Africa or South Asia, classified it as native medicine, a category that carried implications of primitiveness, of superstition, of practices to be replaced by proper European pharmaceuticals. The knowledge that had sustained populations for millennia was dismissed as pre-scientific. By the mid-20th century, in Western Europe and North America, this seed had vanished from mainstream awareness. It was not sold in grocery stores. It was not listed in medical references. It was not taught in nutrition courses or culinary schools. It survived in immigrant communities, in Middle Eastern groceries, in South Asian kitchens, in the traditional practices of people who had brought their knowledge with them. It survived in the countries where it had never stopped being used: Egypt, Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, Bangladesh, the nations of the Arabian Peninsula. In those places it remained what it had always been: a common ingredient, a household remedy, a seed of recognized importance. But in the systems that defined global commerce, global science, and global cuisine, it had become invisible. The seed did not fail. It grew as easily as it ever had, in poor soil, in hot climates, with minimal water. It produced the same compounds it had always produced. The failure was in the systems that could not recognize value they could not control. In the latter decades of the 20th century, as interest in traditional medicine revived among certain segments of the scientific community, researchers began examining plants that had long histories of use but limited modern study. This seed attracted attention. The chemical analysis revealed a complex composition. The seeds contained fixed oils, lipids that could be pressed out and used as cooking oil or applied topically. They contained essential oils, volatile aromatic compounds responsible for the seed's distinctive, sharp, slightly bitter flavor. They contained proteins, carbohydrates, fiber, and a range of micronutrients. But the compound that drew the most research interest was a molecule called thymoquinone. Thymoquinone is the primary bioactive component of the seed's essential oil. In laboratory studies, in cell cultures, in animal models, in the controlled conditions of experimental pharmacology, thymoquinone has demonstrated a range of biological activities. It has shown antioxidant effects, neutralizing reactive oxygen species that can damage cells. It has shown anti-inflammatory effects, modulating pathways involved in the body's response to injury and infection. It has shown antimicrobial effects against certain bacteria and fungi in laboratory conditions. These are observations of chemistry and biology. They are not medical claims. The gap between laboratory findings and clinical application is vast, and many compounds that show promise in controlled experiments fail to translate into effective treatments for humans. But the research interest is significant. Thousands of studies have been published on this seed and its constituents. It has become one of the most extensively studied traditional remedies in the scientific literature. Beyond thymoquinone, the seeds contain other compounds of interest: thymohydroquinone, thymol, carvacrol, fatty acids including linoleic and oleic acid, vitamins of the B complex, minerals including iron, calcium, and zinc. The seeds are nutrient-dense in a way that exceeds their caloric contribution. From an agricultural perspective, the plant that produces these seeds is remarkably undemanding. It is an annual, completing its life cycle in a single growing season. It germinates readily from seed, grows quickly, and produces flowers that are distinctive, pale blue or white, delicate, with an unusual structure that botanists describe as fenestrated. The seed pods develop after flowering, and when dry, release their small black contents. The plant tolerates heat. It tolerates drought once established. It grows in soil too poor for many crops, asking little in the way of fertility or amendment. It can be grown in containers, in raised beds, in marginal spaces where other plants would struggle. It self-sows reliably, returning year after year in gardens where it is allowed to complete its cycle. For home growers, this is a plant of almost absurd generosity. A small packet of seeds, scattered in spring, can produce enough plants to yield a meaningful harvest by late summer. The seeds store well when dried, for years, if kept cool and dark. It is not a plant that requires industrial infrastructure. It is not a plant that benefits from mechanization. It is a plant scaled to human hands, to small plots, to the kind of agriculture that existed before agriculture became an industry. The seed is called black cumin. It is also known as black seed, black caraway, kalonji, and by dozens of other names across the languages of the regions where it has been used. In Arabic, it is habatus sauda, the black seed. In Hindi and Urdu, it is kalonji. In Turkish, çörek otu. The multiplicity of names reflects the multiplicity of cultures that have valued it. It is not related to common cumin, despite the name. It is not related to caraway, despite another of its names. It belongs to the buttercup family, a botanical classification that places it alongside flowers more often grown for ornament than for food. Today, it grows across a wide geographic range. It is cultivated commercially in Egypt, in India, in Turkey, in the countries of the Middle East and North Africa. It is grown in home gardens across South Asia, where it is used in cooking, sprinkled on bread, added to vegetable dishes, incorporated into spice blends. It is sold in specialty stores in Europe and North America, where interest has grown slowly but steadily over recent decades. The flavor is distinctive, peppery, slightly bitter, with an aromatic quality that some describe as reminiscent of oregano or thyme. It is used in small quantities, as a seasoning rather than a bulk ingredient. In Middle Eastern cuisines, it appears on flatbreads and in cheese. In Indian cuisines, it is added to pickles and vegetable dishes. In Ethiopian cuisine, it is part of the complex spice blend called berber. For those who want to grow it, the requirements are modest. The seeds are sown in early spring, after the last frost, in soil that drains well. Full sun is preferred. The plants reach 1 to 2 feet in height and require no staking, no special care. Watering is needed only during dry spells once the plants are established. By midsummer, the flowers appear. By late summer, the seed pods mature. When the pods turn brown and dry, they are harvested and the seeds are extracted by threshing, a process that can be done by hand for small quantities. The seeds are stored in airtight containers, away from light and heat. They retain their potency for several years. They can be used whole, ground into powder, or pressed for oil. The plant is not difficult. The seeds are not rare. The knowledge of how to use them is not lost. It persists in the kitchens and gardens and medical traditions of hundreds of millions of people. What was lost was only Western attention, and that is beginning to change. In health food stores, black cumin oil is now sold alongside other specialty oils. In research institutions, studies continue to accumulate. In immigrant communities that never forgot, the seed remains what it has always been, a small, black, angular gift from a plant that asks almost nothing and offers more than most. It was placed in the tomb of a pharaoh 3,000 years ago. It was described as a cure for everything except death. It grew in the gardens of Greek physicians and medieval Islamic scholars. It traveled along trade routes to every corner of the ancient world. It never stopped growing. It never stopped being used. It was only invisible to those who did not know where to look. The knowledge was always here. We just stopped looking.